Chapter 5. In Kabir Lane, the old stove enamelled blue board had been taken down. In its place hung the inscription, Sunrise Pictures, Registered Offices.
Over Sampath's door shone the brass inscription, Director of Productions. The director was usually to be found upstairs in Srinivasa's garret. Somu was also to be found there several hours a day.
Sampath had planted a few more chairs in Srinivasa's office, because, as he said, it was virtually the conference room of Sunrise Pictures. A young man in shirt sleeves, clad in white drill trousers, of unknown province or even nationality, whose visiting card bore the inscription, The Mellow of Hollywood, was the brain behind the studio organization. He called himself CE, Chief Executive, and labeled all the others a variety of executives.
He was paid a salary of 1,000 rupees a month, and Somu had so much regard for him that he constantly chuckled to himself that he had got him cheap. Sampath, too, felt overawed by the other's technical knowledge, and left him alone, as he roamed over the 5 acres, from morning to night, supervising and ordering people about, clutching in one hand a green cigarette tin. In addition to raising the studio structure and creating its departments, De Mello established a new phraseology for the benefit of this community.
Conference was one such. No two persons met, nowadays, except in a conference. No talk was possible unless it were a discussion.
There were story conferences and treatment discussions, and there were costume conferences and allied discussions. Lesser persons would probably call them by simpler names, but it seemed clear that in the world of films an esoteric idiom of its own was indispensable for its dignity and development. Kabir Lane now resounded with the new jargon.
They sat around Srinivasa's table, and long stretches of silence ensued, as they remained stock still with their faces in their palms, gazing sadly at paperweights and pincushions. One might have thought that they were enveloped in an inescapable gloom, but if one took the trouble to clarify the situation by going 3 miles across the river and asking De Mello, he would have explained, the bosses are in a story conference. And what story emerged from it?
None for several days. The talk went round and round in circles, and yet there was no story. A few heavy books appeared on the table from time to time.
Srinivas suddenly found himself up to his ears in the affair. Sampath piloted him into it so deftly that before he knew where he was, he found himself involved in its problems, and what is more, began to feel it his duty to tackle them. It took him time to realize his place in the scheme.
When he did realize it, his imagination caught fire. He felt that he was acquiring a novel medium of expression. Ideas were to march straight on from him in all their pristine strength, without the intervention of language. Ideas, walking, talking and passing into people's minds as images like a drug entering the system through the hypodermic needle.
He realized that he need not regret the absence of the banner. He felt so excited by this discovery that he found himself unable to go on with the conference one afternoon. He suddenly rose in his seat, declaring, I've got to do some calm thinking.
I will go home now. He went straight home, through the blazing afternoon. At Anderson Lane he saw his wife sitting in front of Ravi's block, along with his mother and sister.
A cry of surprise escaped her at the sight of him. She left their company abruptly. What is the matter?
She asked eagerly, following him into their house and closing the main door. He turned on her with amusement and said, What should be the matter when a man returns to his own house? She muttered, Shall I make coffee for you?
I have just finished mine. Oh, don't bother about all that. I've had coffee. Get me a pillow and mat.
I'm going to rest. Why? Are you ill? She asked apprehensively, and she pulled a pillow out of the rolls of bedding piled in a corner.
The beds fell out of their order and unrolled on the floor untidily. She felt abashed, muttered, Careless fool, and engaged herself in rolling them up and rearranging them, while Srinivas took off his upper cloth and shirt and banyan and went to the bathroom. In the little bathroom, a shaft of light fell through a glass tile on the copper tub under the tap and sent out a multicolored reflection from its surface.
He paused to admire it for a moment, plunged his hands into the tub, splashed cold water all over his face and shoulders. As he came out of the bathroom, he hoped that his wife would have spread out the mat for him. But he found her still rolling up the beds.
Where is my mat? He cried. I have no time to lose, dearest.
I must sleep immediately. Why have you splashed all that water on yourself like an elephant at the river edge? I found my head boiling. That's why I have to do a lot of fresh thinking now.
He paused before the mirror to wipe his head with a towel and comb back his hair. After that he turned hopefully, but still found her busy with the beds. He cried impatiently, "Oh, leave that alone and give me a mat."
She shot him a swift look and said, "The mat is there. If you can't wait till I put all this back. I hate the sight of untidy beds." She went on with her work.
Srinivas picked up a mat and spread it in a corner, snatched a pillow and lay down reflecting, "How near a catastrophe I have been." He looked on his wife's face, which was slightly flushed with anger. He felt he had come perilously near ruining the day.
He knew her nature. She could put up with a great deal, except imperiousness or an authoritarian tone in others. When she was young, a music master, who once tried to be severe with her for some reason, found that he had lost a pupil forever.
She just flung away her music notebook, sprang out of the room and bade farewell to music. Everybody at her house respected her sensitiveness, and even Srinivas's mother was very cautious in talking to her. Srinivas had, on the whole, a fairly even life with her, without much friction, but the one or two minor occasions when he had seemed to give her orders turned out to be memorable occasions.
His domestic life seemed to have nearly come to an end each time, and it needed a lot of readjustment on his part later. He respected her sensitiveness. He told himself now, "Well, I shot the shaft which has hurt her and brought all that blood to her face."
He rebuked himself for the slightly authoritative tone he had adopted in demanding the mat. It's the original violence which has started a cycle, violence which goes on in undying waves once started, either in retaliation or as an original starting ground. The despair of Gandhi. He suddenly saw Gandhi's plea for non-violence with a new significance. As one of the paths of attaining harmony in life, non-violence in all matters, little or big, personal or national, it seemed to produce an unagitated, undisturbed calm, both in a personality and in society.
His wife was still at the beds. He felt it his duty to make it up with her. He asked, "When does Ramu return from school?"
"At 4:30, she replied curtly. "Come and sit down here," he said, moving away a little to make space for her. She looked at him briefly and obeyed.
Her anger left her. Her face relaxed. She sat beside him. He took her hand in his.
She was transformed. She sat leaning on him. He put his arm around her and pressed his face against her black sari.
A faint aroma of kitchen smoke and damp was about her. He told her softly, "I'm taking up a new work today." He explained to her and concluded, "Do you realize how much we can do now?
I can write about our country's past and present. A story about Gandhiji's non-violence, our politics, all kinds of things." He chatted away about his plans.
"This seems so much better than that paper," she exclaimed happily. "I'm sure more people will like this. That banner was so dull."
"You will not revive it?" "Can't say. When Sampath gets a new machine with the money he is going to make."
"Why should you bother about it?" she asked. "Will this bring you a lot of money?"
"I don't know," he said. "We must have a lot more money to spend," she said. "We must go and live in a better house," she pleaded.
I don't know, he said, looking about helplessly. "I don't know if I would care to live elsewhere. I like this place."
And he smiled weakly, realizing at once what a hopeless confusion his whole outlook was. He could not define what he wanted. They went on talking till the boy knocked on the door and cried at the top of his voice, "Mother!
"Mother! Why have you bolted the door?" "Oh, he has come," she cried, and ran up and opened the door.
The boy burst in with a dozen inquiries. He flung his cap and books away and let out a shout of joy on seeing his father, and threw himself on him. His mother attempted to take him in and give him his milk and tiffin, but he resisted it and announced, "In our school there was a snake today."
"Oh, really? But it didn't bite the masters," he added. "Then what else did it do?"
"I don't know," he said. "I didn't see it. A friend of mine told me about it."
His mother took him by his hand and dragged him into the kitchen. Srinivas shut his eyes tight with almost a sense of duty. But his wife presently came out of the kitchen and said, "Take me out this evening."
"Let us go to the market." "Oh, but," Srinivas began. The boy became irrepressible.
"Oh, don't say but, father. Let us go, ask him, mother. Don't let him say, but, mother. Let us go to a cinema.
His mother said, yes, why not? I will finish the cooking in a moment and be ready. All right, Srinivas said, unable to refuse this duty.
All night his head seethed with ideas and would not let him snatch even a wink. Half a dozen times he interrupted a possible coming sleep to get up, switch on the light, and jot down notes. He got up late next day and rushed to his office.
He knew no peace till he was back at his untidy table. He seized his rose-colored pen holder, dipped it in the ink pot, and kept dipping it there, as if excavating something out of its bed. The sheets before him filled up, and he became unconscious of the passing of time, till he heard a car stop and the shout from below, "Editor!"
He concluded a sentence he had begun, and put away his pen as footsteps approached. Somu and Sampath sat in their chairs. We have just come from the studio, took a few test shots with the camera.
Sampath pointed at Somu and said, they have taken 500 feet of our friend entering the studio. He makes such a fine screen personality, you know. Somu tried to blush and remarked, it's a good camera, sir, it has cost us 40,000.
40,000. Srinivas exclaimed. The scales of value in this world amazed him.
All calculations were in terms of thousands. Where do they find all this money? He wondered.
Everything is ready, Sampath said. Camera at 40,000, the mellow costing 1,000 rupees a month, and other executives spending 10,000 in all waiting, but where is the story? Srinivas felt that he was somehow responsible for keeping the great engines of production waiting.
Sampath added, if we have a story ready, we can go into production next month. Somu confessed, I have tried to jot down a few ideas for a story.
I don't know if it will look all right. He fumbled in his pocket, but Sampath, stretching out his arm, prevented the other from bringing out his paper, saying at the same time, well, editor, we rely upon you to give us something today. Srinivas cleared his throat and said, here is an outline.
See if you can use it. He read on. The others listened in stony silence.
The hero of the story was one Ram Gopal, who had devoted his life to the abolition of the caste system and other evils of society. His ultimate ambition in life was to see his motherland freed from foreign domination. He was a disciple of Gandhi's philosophy, practicing ahimsa, non-violence, in thought, word and deed.
And his philosophy was constantly being put to the test till in the end a dilemma occurred when through circumstances a single knife lay between him and a would-be assailant. It was within the reach of both, it was a question of killing or getting killed. Srinivas had not decided how to end his story.
The other two listened in grim silence. Somu looked visibly distressed. He looked at Sampath as if for help in expressing an opinion.
It is a beautiful story, editor. I wish I had the press so that we might print and broadcast it. You see, Srinivas explained.
This is the greatest message we can convey, the message of Gandhiji in terms of an experience. Don't you agree? Yes, Sampath replied a little uncomfortably.
Somu fidgeted in his seat. There was an uncomfortable pause, and Sampath said, but we need something different for films. Do you mean to say that this cannot be done in a film?
Srinivas asked as calmly as he could. He felt slightly irritated by this cold reception, but told himself, take care not to be violent in discussing a story of non-violence. They are entitled to their view.
Somu cleared his voice and ventured to mutter within his throat, you see, we must have romance in the story. Romance. Srinivas gasped.
What sort of romance? You see, we are bound to engage a leading lady who will cost us at least 2,000 a month, and we have got to give her a suitable role. Sampath said, of course, the type of subject you think of needs much skill and experience in making.
Only Russians or Americans would be able to tackle it. I have just been glancing through a book by Pudovkin. The Mellow lent me his copy.
There is a great deal in it for us to learn, but it will take time. You see, our public. Don't abuse the public, please, said Srinivas.
We have got to be practical in this business. Srinivas was amazed at the speed with which they seemed to imbibe ready-made notions, including Pudovkin, whom everyone in the studio mentioned at least once a day. It was a sort of trademark. I would like to see that book myself, Srinivas said.
Yes, I will bring it down tomorrow, Sampath said. You will see what our difficulties are. After all, we are making a start.
After we have made 3 or 4 films, we shall perhaps gain confidence enough to take up a subject like yours, but now we have to move on safe ground. Somu kept up an accompanying murmur, stamping his approval on all that Sampath was saying. Srinivas saw their point, their limitations and their exigencies.
He merely said, "Well, I was viewing it differently. Let us consider the question afresh." Somu sat up, his face beamed with relief.
He quickly plunged his hand into his pocket and brought out a roll of paper and his spectacle case. He put his glasses on and read too quickly for Sampath to check him. Krishna Leela, the boyhood of Krishna and his friends, up to his killing of the demon Kamsa. He looked up to add, "I was talking to my grand-aunt, you know how our people are a treasure house of stories, and she mentioned these stories one by one.
You see, we can do wonderful camera tricks, and Krishna will always be popular with our audience. Or if you don't like it," he went on to the next, "the burning of Lanka by the monkey god Hanuman, the disrobing of Draupadi by the villainous gambler Duryodhana, the battle of Kurukshetra, and teaching of Bhagavad Gita, the pricking of the vanity of Garuda, the divine eagle, who served as God's couch."
And so he continued for over 20 subjects, all from the epics and mythology. The grand-aunt, like all grand-aunts, was really a treasure house, and Somu did not hesitate to draw on it to its fullest capacity. Sampath briefly dismissed each one of them with, "This subject is not new.
Already been done by others, this story has been produced 3 times over." "What if it has?" "We shall do it again," said Mr. Somu.
The public will run away on hearing the name of the story." "Oh, what about this then? Has this been done by anyone before?"
"The burning to ashes of Kama, god of love." Sampath said, "No one has attempted this subject, I'm sure of it. Let us hear the story."
Mr. Somu narrated the story, humming and hawing and clearing his throat. "You see, sir," he began, and looked about in a terrified way, like a man who cannot swim when he gets into water. Go on," said Sampath encouragingly.
"You see, you know Shiva." "Which Shiva?" "The god," said Sampath, unable to resist a piece of impishness.
"Yes, we all happen to know him fairly well," Mr. Somu was saying. "You see." He was still fumbling with "you sees."
And Srinivas felt that the time had come to succor him. He said in a quiet way, "I happen to know the story. Shiva is in a rigorous meditation, when his future bride, Parvati, is ministering to his needs as a devotee and an absolute stranger. One day, opening his eyes, he realizes that passion is stirring within him, and looking about for the cause he sees Kama, the lord of love, aiming his shaft at him. At this, enraged, he opens his third eye in the forehead and reduces Kama to ashes." Srinivasa's imagination was stirred as he narrated the story. He saw every part of it clearly. The god of love with his 5 arrows, 5 senses, his bow was made of sugar cane, his bowstring was of murmuring honey bees, and his chariot was the light summer breeze. When he attempted to try his strength on the rigorous Shiva himself, he was condemned to an invisible existence. Srinivas read a symbolic meaning in this representation of the power of love, its equipment, its limitation, and saw in the burning of Kama an act of sublimation. "You are perfectly right, Somu," he cried, almost reaching out his hand across the table and patting Somu on the shoulders. Somu's face beamed with satisfaction. He looked like a child rewarded with a peppermint for a piece of good behavior. Sampath declared with great relief, "I'm glad, editor, you like the subject. Now you will have to go on with the treatment. We will fix up other things." "The advantage in this is," Somu put in, "there is any amount of love in the story, and people will like it. Personally, also, I never like to read any story if it has no love in it." 3 days later, the front page of most papers announced, Sunrise Pictures invite applications from attractive young men and women for acting in their forthcoming production, The Burning of Kama. Apply with photographs. Day after day, Srinivas sat working on his script. He now seemed to be camping in Kailash, the ice-capped home of Lord Shiva and his followers. Srinivas could almost feel the coolness of the place and its iridescent surroundings. He saw, as in a vision, before his eyes Shiva, that mendicant-looking god, his frame ash-smeared, his loin girt with tiger hide, his trident in his hand. He was an austere god, he was the god of destruction.
His dance was in the burial ground, his swaying footsteps produced a deluge.
As Srinivas described it, his mind often went back to the little image of Nataraj that he had in a niche at home, before which his wife lit a small oil lamp every day. He was sketching out the scenes, and felt it a peculiar good fortune to have been allowed to do this work. He never bothered about anything else.
His wife understood his mood and listened attentively to all that he said about it at home. She, too, knew the story, and the talk at home was all about karma and his fate. Srinivas constantly explained the subtle underlying sense of the whole episode.
His son, too, listened with great interest and boasted before his friends that his father knew all about Shiva's burning of the love god. At his office, sheet after sheet filled up. Srinivas read and reread the dialogues and descriptions he had written.
His mind had become a veritable stage for divine beings to move and act, and he had little interest in anything else. Coffee came to him from time to time, sent up by Sampath. He now left Srinivas alone for a great part of the day so as to enable him to produce the story with the least delay, while he tackled the vast volume of correspondence that resulted from their advertisements in the papers.
Into this delicately arranged world Ravi walked one day. Srinivas's mind noted the creaking on the staircase. Srinivas put away his pen and paper and received him warmly.
"Seems years since you visited us. Any progress with any picture?" he asked.
Ravi shook his head. What has happened that I should draw now? Srinivas took out of his table drawer the little sketch Ravi had drawn.
Ravi looked at it and said, "I can make a full-length portrait in oils, the like of which no one else will have done in India. Give me another glimpse of my subject, and the picture is yours." Srinivas said, "Like Shiva, open your third eye and burn up love, so that all its grossness and contrary elements are cleared away and only its essence remains. That is the way to attain peace, my boy."
I don't know how long you are going to suffer in this manner. You have to pull yourself together. Oh, shut up. You don't know what you are talking about. All that I'm asking is another glimpse of my subject, that is all, and nothing more, and you go on talking as if I were asking someone to go to bed with me.
Before I am able to open my third eye and burn up love, I am myself likely to be reduced to ashes. That is the position, sir. And you want me to draw my pictures with a firm hand?" He laughed grimly and leaned back in his chair. Srinivas looked at him in despair.
Something is seriously wrong with him, he reflected. He won't be sane unless he paints, and he can't paint unless he is sane. He can't be sane unless he finds that girl, and he cannot find that girl unless he can. Heaven alone knows how many more cans and ifs are going to play havoc with his life.
He looked at him despairingly. Ravi remained silent for a moment and suddenly said with tears in his voice, "I have lost my job today." "Lost it?"
What do you mean? Srinivas cried. It is all so hopeless, Ravi said.
It is all over. I don't know, he sighed, thinking of all his dependents. I think it is finished. I have 3 months' arrears of rent to pay and the school fees of the children, and then.
Don't worry about all that now, Srinivas said. Don't lose heart. We will do something.
Tell me, what has happened? The clerical staff of our office decided to present a memorial to our general manager, asking for promotions. We were all drafting it in our office when the manager called me in urgently.
You know him, that compound of beef and whiskey. He had found fault in the spelling of some word in a letter he had previously dictated, some mistake in a proper name, those wonderful names of English people. Chumley, it seems, must be spelt Chumley.
Who can understand all this devilry of their language? And he thundered and banged the table and flung the letter at me and asked me to take the dictation again. At this moment the others were coming towards our room to present the memorial.
They were nearly 30, and we could hear them coming. What the hell is that noise? He remarked, and went on with his dictation. Very soon we could hear them outside the door, a scurrying of feet and restless movement outside.
I hoped that they would open the door and walk in a body. We could see their feet below the half door. We could see them moving up and down and shifting but not coming in.
On the other hand, we presently saw them pressing their noses against the frosted glass pane of a window, trying to look in and see if the boss was in a good mood. It was of frosted glass, and though they could not see us, we could see them on the other side. What is all this tomfoolery?
What are they up to? Go and find out. Is this a peep show?
I went out and told them, why do you shuffle and hesitate? Come in and speak to him boldly. They looked at each other nervously, and before they could decide, the boss sounded the buzzer again and called me in.
What is it? They have come with a representation, sir. How many?
The entire staff, sir. Damn! He exclaimed under his breath.
I can't see the whole gang here. Ask them to choose someone who can talk for them. I went out and told them that.
They looked at each other and would not choose anyone. They could not come to a decision about it. They were all for edging away and putting the responsibility on someone else.
Even the man who held the memorial paper seemed ready to drop it and run away. I picked it up and went in. They want to come in a body, sir, I said.
No, he cried. This is not a bloody assembly hall, is it? This is the memorial they want to present, sir, I said, and put it before him.
He looked at it without touching it. All right, now leave me for a time, and go back to your seats. He didn't call me again.
This note came to me at the end of the day, when I was starting to go home. He took it out of his pocket and held it up. It was a brief typewritten message. Your services are terminated with effect from tomorrow.
1 month's salary in lieu of notice will be paid to you in due course. Srinivas went over next day to Ravi's office to see what he could do. It was a very unprepossessing building in a side street beyond the market square, with a faded board hanging over a narrow doorway, Ingladia Banking Corporation.
A peon in a sort of white skirt, a relic of the East India Company costume at Fort St. George, and a red band across his shoulder sat on a stool at the entrance. On the ground floor sat a number of typists and clerks, nosing into fat ledgers. Uniformed attendants were moving about, carrying trays and file boards. A bell kept ringing.
Where is the manager? Asked Srinivas. The servant pointed up the staircase. Srinivas came before a brass plate on the landing, and tapped on the half door.
Come in, said a heavy voice. Srinivas saw before him a red-faced man, sitting in a revolving chair, with a shining bald front and a mop of brown hair covering the back of his head. He nodded amiably and said, "Good morning," and pointed to a chair.
Srinivas announced himself, and the other said, I am very pleased to see you, Mr. Srinivas. What can I do for you? You can take back my friend Ravi into your service.
It is not fair. You are friends, are you? The other cut in.
He paused, took out his cigarette case, and held it out. I don't smoke, thanks, said Srinivas. The other pulled out a cigarette, stuck it in a corner of his mouth, looked reflective and said, Yes, it is a pity he had to go, but we are retrenching our staff. Those are the instructions from our controlling office at Bombay.
He is the only one to suffer, said Srinivas. Yes, at the moment, the other said with a grim smile. Srinivas burst out, You are very unfair, Mr. Schilling.
You cannot sack people at short notice. I am afraid I agree with you. But the controlling office at Bombay.
This is all mere humbug. You know why you have dismissed my friend? Because you think he is an agitator.
I don't know that I would care to discuss all that now. Other things apart, Mr. Srinivas, there is such a thing as being fit for a job. What can I do with a stenographer who cannot understand spelling?
Why the devil do you spell Chamli with a lot of idiotic letters? You cannot penalize us for that. You are certainly warming up, the other said, quite unruffled.
I quite agree with you. English spelling needs reforming. But till it is done, stenographers had better stay conventional.
You see my point? He raised himself in his seat slightly, held out his thick hand, saying, If there is nothing else I can do. Srinivas pushed his chair back and rose, and said, This is not the India of East India Company days, remember, when you were looked upon as a sahib, when probably your grand-uncle had an escort of 5 elephants whenever he stirred out.
Nowadays you have to give and take at ordinary human levels, do you understand? Forget forever that God created Indians in order to provide clerks for the East India Company or their successors. Well, you are saying a lot.
The other left his seat and came over to him. Mr. Srinivas, you are not helping your friend by making a scene here. I don't understand what you are driving at.
Don't you see how you are treating the man? Can't you see the lack of elementary justice? He has a family dependent upon him, and you are nearly driving him to starvation.
Now you must really go away, Mr. Srinivas, he said, holding open the door. Good morning. His self-possession was a disappointment to Srinivas.
He muttered weakly, "Good morning," and passed out. He ran downstairs, past the man in skirt-like dress, out into the market road. He paused for a moment at the turning of Market Road to collect his thoughts.
A few cyclists rang their bells at him impatiently. The sun was warm, though it was October, it still looked like June. Edward Shilling was red as blotting paper and suffocated with the heat, and yet he sat there in his shirt sleeves, worked for his controlling office, and kept his self-possession.
Turning over what he had said, Srinivas felt he had spoken wildly and aimlessly. What is it that I've tried to say? He asked himself.
He felt that his ideas arranged themselves properly and attained perspective only when he was writing in the banner. He wished he could sit down and spin out a page under the heading, Black and White, or East India Company, and trace Shilling's history from the foundation stone laying of Fort St. George. At the Kabir Lane office downstairs, Sampath was in conference with an odd assortment of people, actors, musicians and so on, who had besieged him after the advertisements in the papers.
Srinivas stood in the doorway unnoticed, wondering how he was going to have a word with the other. "Will you come out for a minute?" he cried.
Sampath got up and elbowed his way out. They stood at the foot of the staircase. Ravi is done with at his office.
We shall have to do something for him now. Sampath was a man of many worries now. This was just one more.
He rubbed his forehead and said, I'm interviewing some of these artists. I will come up in a moment. Srinivas turned and went upstairs, feeling very confused and unhappy.
He felt he would never be able to finish that third scene today. His mind was in a whirl of cross-currents. I don't know how the poor fellow is going to manage things on the 1st of next month.
He found Ravi dozing off in a corner, with his head resting on the arm of a chair. He was snoring loudly. Srinivas looked at him for a moment, and went to his table on tiptoe.
He had left a sentence unfinished. He mechanically picked up his pen and tried to continue. But his mind wouldn't move.
He found that it was impossible to pursue the scenes of Kailash at a moment like this. I had better put it away and spend my evening in some other way, he told himself. He lifted a fat dictionary, which served as paperweight, and laid the sheets of paper under it.
Ravi opened his eyes, sat up, and yawned. Did you meet the bully? Yes, Srinivas said.
He didn't seem to be much of one, though. He didn't say, damn, or bang the table even once. Oh, yes, that is a privilege he has reserved for his staff, not for his visitors.
He won't take me back, I suppose. Srinivas shook his head. Not a chance.
But don't bother, we will do something for you. It has all happened for the best, he said, not feeling very convinced of it. And Ravi at once added, a benefit which will become known after all my people have perished and I am in the streets. The old devil will drive me out if I don't pay the rent next month. God has gifted you with art and he will not let you starve, if you are true to yourself. At the mention of art, Ravi's eyes blazed with anger and he almost let out a hiss. What is the matter with you, calling me artist and all that bunkum? Go and tell it to those who are likely to feel flattered by it. He subsided into a sort of unintelligible whimper. Srinivas said nothing in reply, but merely held up the old sketch. Ravi looked at it and became somewhat quietened. He gazed at it fixedly and said, if you think I am an artist on the strength of that, he added, she is the real artist and not I. A picture is produced only when she appears. A flash of her eyes can make a picture. I think she could do that even to you. If you saw her, you would produce a masterpiece, I'm sure, a grand canvas. But where is she? Everybody deceives me. He pointed downstairs. I've even given up asking him about it. I've grown tired. But have you done his son's picture for him? Oh, that? He became reflective. How can I? When I tell you I cannot draw? Presently Sampath came up and went to a chair. He looked tired. I have interviewed nearly 50 persons today. Not one fit to be seen even in a crowd scene. I don't know why they keep coming like this. Srinivas scribbled on a piece of paper. Have you thought of anything for Ravi? If you have, don't speak it out yet. He passed it unobtrusively to Sampath. Sampath looked at it, looked at Ravi, crumpled the paper and threw it away. Srinivas suddenly got up and started to go downstairs. Sampath followed him. On seeing them rise, Ravi, too, got up. I will be going. Where? I don't know, he said, and moved on to the door.
Srinivas said, "Don't go away yet. I will be back in a moment." Ravi obeyed him mutely and resumed his seat. At the foot of the stairs, Sampath told Srinivas, "I can speak to Somu and take him in the art department.
He can become an art director in due course. Will he get enough to support him?" "Yes, about 100 now."
"Oh, that's ample. 25 rupees more than what he got in the bank." "Will he accept it?" asked Sampath. "He doesn't talk to me much nowadays."
"I will make him accept it," said Srinivas. "But don't tell him that it is anything connected with the arts. But he will have to take his brush and start work almost immediately, otherwise it will create difficulties for me with Somu," Sampath said.
"You just take him in somewhere, and we will settle about his future later. For the present, take him into your office section. Just for our sakes, please."
"Yes, I will see what I can do. But it is going to be rather difficult with Somu." Srinivas went upstairs and took his seat.
He felt there was no use leaving the choice in any matter to Ravi. He assumed a peremptory tone and said, "I've a job at 100 rupees for you." "Where?"
"Where? You are good at accounts, aren't you? All you will have to do is to keep the debits and credits in good shape, and they will give you 100 rupees.
"Yes, gladly, provided you don't expect me to draw any pictures." "Not at all. How can we?"
You have told us of your limitations." Ravi's face shone with relief. He said, "I won't even mind if there is a bully there who will worry me to death."
Sampath dropped in at Srinivas's house one morning. Srinivas cried from bed, "What a rare visit. So early in the day."
"Just left home early, and I thought I might as well drop in." Srinivas hurriedly rolled up his bed. He spread out a mat for Sampath and said, "I will be back in a minute."
Before going, he called to his son, who was still sleeping. Ramu opened his eyes and stared at Sampath, at his fur cap and the scarf. "Who are you?"
Sampath grinned and answered, "Uncle Sampath. Have you forgotten me?" He took off his cap and scarf and lifted the little fellow out of his bed and said, "Now, do you see?"
The child rubbed his eyes wide and said, "Oh, you. Oh, you print father's paper." "Oh, that was in another age," Sampath said, looking wistfully at him.
"Won't you give me one type?" Ramu pleaded. "Why one?"
"You can have the entire lot, when I can get at them myself. Anyway, why do you want types?" "I want to print my name very urgently on my books."
"Oh, what a pity." Sampath burst into a laugh.
"I am never able to face my customers with a straight reply. It's the same story for everyone." He laughed heartily.
Ramu was puzzled. "Why do you laugh?" he asked.
"Yes, you will get your name slip from a lino." "When?" asked the boy. Sampath scratched his chin thoughtfully, and said, "As soon as possible."
"Ask your father. It all depends upon him. As soon as we have Shiva and Kama set up before the camera."
"Why before a camera?" the boy asked, rather puzzled. "We are making a cinema picture, don't you know?"
Srinivas asked. "Yes, will you take me there?" "Certainly, I will bring a car and take you there someday, provided you read your lessons well."
"How do you do in your classwork?" "There is a boy in our class called Sambhu who always stands first in all subjects. He is my friend."
He added reflectively, "Do you know there was a snake in our school one day, but it did not bite any of the masters?" "Did it bite any of the boys?" asked Sampath. "Oh, no," he replied, shaking his head and smiling indulgently.
"Boys are not allowed to go near it." "Oh, that's the rule in your school, is it?" asked Sampath. "Yes," Ramu replied.
Srinivas returned, bearing a plate of tiffin and a tumbler of coffee, and set them down before Sampath. "You have put yourself to a lot of trouble," muttered Sampath. "Oh, stop all that formal courtesy," Srinivas said.
"All right, sir, I'm hungry and the stuff seems to be of rare quality." Ramu watched him for a moment, uttered some comment, and tried to resume his sleep. His father said, "Now, little man, don't try to sleep again.
Get up and get ready for your school. It's 7:30. At the mention of 7:30, Ramu sprang up with a cry of, "Oh!
My teacher will skin me if I am late," and ran out. When they were left alone, Sampath said, "I came here in order to talk to you undisturbed. Wait a minute then, Srinivas said, picked up the empty tumbler and plates and carried them away, and returned, closing the middle door.
Oh, so much precaution is not necessary. It is only about our Somu. I wanted to say something.
I don't like to be under any obligation to him. I can't go on at the present rate. What has happened?
Nothing definitely, but the trouble is always there. He is the proprietor of the studio, and he is prepared to give us the best service the studio can give. Well, it is all right for everybody concerned, isn't it?
Please wait till I finish my sentence. Provided he is taken as a studio partner and nothing more, that is, not as the producer and investor. He has been grumbling about it for some days now.
Why, he seemed quite enthusiastic about it. That he is still, but it seems to me that he wants me also to invest. His partnership will take the form of studio service, that is all. For the rest we will have to find the money ourselves.
Why is he backing out now? It is not backing out. If he is not backing out, what else is he doing, and why are you worried about it?
Srinivas found this entire financial transaction mystifying. He was trying hard to follow the threads of the problem. Sampath talked for over an hour, and Srinivas gathered from his speech that he needed money for putting the picture into production. But you must already be spending a great deal.
But that's all studio account, said Sampath, and once again Srinivas found his understanding floundering. It seemed to him somewhat like relativity, giving brief flashes of clarity which prove only illusory. Now he definitely gave up any attempt at understanding the problem.
Srinivas asked point blank, so, what? What's to be done now? I must find 50,000 rupees if I have to produce the picture.
This will enable me to go through the picture with a free and independent mind, and when it is done, or rather, even when we are halfway through it, we can realize the entire amount and more by selling the territorial rights for distributors. Srinivas was pleased to hear this note of hope.
Sampath continued, I found 1 or 2 people who are prepared to join me. I just want another person who will give 10,000, and that will complete the sum. Oh, you know my position, Srinivas said apprehensively.
Oh, no, Sampath said. I wouldn't dream of bothering you about it. I'm told that your landlord has a lot of money.
Can't you speak to him and persuade him to invest? My landlord. Oh!
Srinivas burst out laughing. He checked himself presently, and quietly said, he is a great miser. He won't spend even 10 rupees on himself.
That's true. But he will get about 12.5% assured. I don't know if anybody has succeeded in getting any money out of him.
He won't spend anything on another water pipe for us. Can't you try? Oh, I have never spoken to him about money.
He always calls himself very poor. All the mention he has made of money with me is some 5,000 which he's reserved for his granddaughter's marriage, and that, too, he mentioned to me, because he wanted me to recommend her to Ravi. He explained the old man's persistent pursuit of Ravi.
You won't mind if I meet the old man and talk to him? Asked Sampath. Not at all. Why should I? But don't say that I sent you there.
When Srinivas passed that way, Ravi's aged father, who was blind, somehow sensed him and called to him. It was a most painful experience for Srinivas to go into their house. The single room, crowded with Ravi's younger brothers and sisters, the smoke from the kitchen hanging over the whole place like December mist, the impossible heaping of boxes and bedding and clothes.
The old man stretched out his hand to feel the hand of Srinivas, fumbled and asked almost in a cry, What did my son do at that office? Nothing. They merely retrenched, replied Srinivas. Are you sure?
If he has done anything to merit punishment, he is not my son. He drew himself up proudly. Our family has gone on without a blemish on its members for 7 generations, do you know?
He asked. Whatever happens to us, we want to preserve a good name in society. The old man went on talking. The ragged children stood around and gaped.
Ravi's mother came in and said, Can't you do something for the boy? He goes out somewhere and returns late every day. You get in, thundered the old man.
Get in and mind your business. I don't want you to trouble this gentleman with all your idiotic words. It is no trouble, said Srinivas.
The lady said, Oh, you are standing. She told one of the boys, He is standing, give him a mat. I won't bring the mat, said the boy suddenly, and pointed to another and said, Let him do it.
Why should I alone do everything? The other fellow pounced upon him for making this suggestion. This quarrel came to a stop when the old man thundered at his wife, "Why can't you leave the children alone, always nagging and worrying them?"
The lady quietly spread out a mat on the floor and said, "Be seated, please." "Yes, yes, pray don't keep standing," added the old man. And then, "Yes, I was saying something, what was it?"
Family honor, Srinivas felt like saying, but suppressed the impulse and said, "Don't you worry about your son. I will see him fixed up satisfactorily in a new place." He felt consolation was due to the old man.
"What office?" the old man asked. "Connected with film production."
"What film production?" "They have recently started a studio," and he went on to explain its nature and scope. The old man said emphatically, "That will never do.
"I wouldn't like my son to work in a place like that, among playboys and dancing girls. I won't have him go there." "He is not acting," said Srinivas.
"If he is not, what business has he there?" asked the old man. The lady fidgeted about nervously, fearing what the old man might say at any moment. Srinivas said, "He is not acting, he is going to do quite a respectable piece of work."
"What is that?" "He is going to be given a start of 100 rupees, and he may rise very fast. I don't care if he is going to earn 10,000, it is of no consequence to me. Tell me what he will have to do to earn his salary."
And then Srinivas had to blurt out, "He is an artist, probably will prove to be the greatest artist of the century someday." "Art. Art."
The old man mimicked offensively. "What does he know of art?" "Please don't be offended with him," begged the lady.
"He doesn't mean to offend you. You go in and do your cooking and don't come and interfere with us here," the old man ordered. The lady quietly went in, sighing a little as she went.
The children trooped behind her with war cries. Srinivas felt like counting their numbers, but refrained from doing so, since he felt that it might fill him with infinite rage against the old man. The old man said, "Do you know what difficulty I had in finding him a job in the bank?
I went from door to door, and how lightly he has thrown it up. And now he wants to pursue art, is that it? What does he know of art?"
"Where has he studied it?" "He is born with it," Srinivas said. "Don't put notions into his head, please," the old man said.
"I would like him to keep up the family honor and not do anything that may bring it discredit in any way. We have lived without dishonor for 7 generations, and now this fellow wants to associate with dancing girls and that sort of gang. He will be spoilt."
"He can't go there, that is certain. Let him beg and cringe and get back to his old office. I saw the manager."
"It's no use," said Srinivas. The old man shook his head. Then he had better try and do something else.
For a man with his wits about him, there must be dozens of ways of making a living without becoming a performing monkey. Srinivas rose to go. He was afraid to open his lips and say anything.
Everything connected with Ravi seemed to get into such complications that he wondered how he was going to survive at all. "Can't you stay a few minutes more?" implored the old man. "I have nothing to offer you in this bare house."
There was a time when in our old house we had 50 guests, and all of them were treated royally. It was a mistake to have left our old house in the village, and it was not my mistake exactly, but my father's. He always, all right, why should I think of all that now?
I was saying, what was I saying before? Srinivas was in no mood to help him out of the constant difficulty into which he seemed to be getting. He merely said, "I have got to be going now."
He did not wait for further permission from the old man. When he had gone a few yards from the house, a little girl came up behind and stopped him. She was one of Ravi's numerous sisters.
"Mother wants to know if you can give us a loan of rupees for buying rice." "Your mother?" "Yes, she didn't want to ask before father, and so sent me on to see you."
"We have had no rice for 2 days and we have been trying to eat something else." Srinivas opened his purse and put 10 rupees into her hands. "Give it to your mother and tell her not to bother about returning it yet, and tell her that Ravi will soon be earning enough to keep you all free from worry." At
his office he found Ravi, sitting up as usual in a semi-doze. Srinivas hung his upper cloth on the nail, came to his seat, and said, "Ravi, I had an interesting talk with your father. This is the first time I've met him, you know, an interesting man." "What did he say?"
Ravi asked anxiously. "Did he speak about me?" Of course, he is bound to talk about you.
Well, I assured him that things will be all right. All that doesn't arise now, since you are well on your way to a new job. It seemed to be a delicate negotiation, steering him into a job.
He had to be put in without much ado, without his own knowledge, so to speak. You can go and start duties tomorrow at the office of Sunrise Pictures down below. He added, for the sake of safety, they need someone with experience in accounts.
Sampath will help you to pick up the work. Ravi seemed to hear the news without showing any enthusiasm. On the first day when it was mentioned, he had seemed so enthusiastic.
Today, somehow, his mood had changed. He looked dully at Srinivas and asked, "Why should I work and earn? For whom?
For whose benefit? Why can I not be allowed to perish as I am?" Srinivas found that a little peremptoriness always helped him with Ravi.
He said, "We can decide all that later. You are free today, probably from tomorrow you will be very busy. Why don't you hear me read out the story to you?"
Ravi sat up attentively. Srinivas picked up his manuscript sheets and started reading from the first scene. Asterisk.
Asterisk. Evidence of Sampath's handiwork came to light. The old landlord dropped in quite early one morning and said, "Tell your wife not to trouble to give me coffee or anything every time I come.
I have come now on business. I can't catch you unless I come so early." Srinivas called up his wife to bring a tumbler of coffee for the old man.
When the coffee arrived, the old man's eyes shone with joy. "You are going to force it on me?" "Yes," said Srinivas, "why not?"
"You forget, sir, that I am a very old man and a sannyasi. At that, I should never indulge in all this, though I am inclined that way. It is not good for my soul. This is not alcohol, after all, only coffee," said Srinivas.
The old man said, "What if it were alcohol? Does a man's salvation depend upon what he drinks?" No.
"It depends upon." He became reflective and paused as if wondering what it really depended on. Srinivas could not resist asking, "On what does it really depend?" The old man looked very puzzled and said, with his fingers fondly curling round the coffee tumbler, "Shall I drink this off before it gets cold?"
He lifted the tumbler, tilted back his head and gulped it off. Srinivas asked, "You would like a piece of areca nut, I am sure, after this?" "Areca nut?"
"Areca nut, at my age? Oh, but how good of you to think of my needs."
Who can ever forget the lovely scented nuts that your wife provides her guests? He reveled in visions of this supreme luxury. Srinivas got up and put a little bottle containing them in his hands.
He looked at it fondly and put it away with a sigh. A man should not succumb to more than one temptation. He raised his voice in a song and quoted an Upanishad which said, "Food is Brahman." A few children came up from Ravi's house and stood in the doorway and watched him with interest.
He glared at them and said, "That is what I hate about children, their habit of hanging about and staring at people. After this, I'm not going to give my house to anyone who has children. They are a nuisance."
"We have all been children," Srinivas said. Yes, the old man agreed. "But what of it?"
"We don't remain children. Leave that vexed question aside. I want to tell you a happy piece of news."
He lowered his voice and said, "It seems that boy is going to get 100 rupees a month." "I always knew that he would rise." "Who told you?" asked Srinivas.
Nobody can conceal such things from me. I know everything that goes on in the town," said the old man rather boastfully. Srinivas thought of Ravi with pity once again.
This was another unwanted element in his already complicated life. The fates seemed to have chosen him for their greatest experiment in messing things up. Srinivas asked the old man, "Has Sampath seen you?"
"He is a good man," the old man said. "I had not the pleasure of seeing him before. But he came to my humble room and sat there one day.
I liked him at first sight. It is always my habit. Nobody can deceive me.
I know when I meet a good fellow, and I know when I meet a bad one. Association is an important thing. Otherwise, why should I ever come in search of you and talk to you, though I have not spoken to anyone in all my life, especially if they are my tenants?"
"What did Sampath say?" asked Srinivas. "Nothing."
He showed a desire to learn a few things in Bhagavad Gita and Upanishads. Somebody seems to have told him that I have perused these things, and he wanted to clear some doubts. "Oh,
exclaimed Srinivas, picturing Sampath, racked with metaphysical doubts. Why do you cry out in such surprise? There are some young men like him even in these days who have spiritual interests.
How can we say no to them? He said he would come to me 2 or 3 days in a week, whenever he found time. Do you know, he asked what fee he should pay me?
I grew very angry with him and told him, I'm not here to sell my knowledge as a market commodity. But he said, very well, master. But any piece of learning accepted becomes worthless, ineffectual, unless a man has given a guru dakshina.
Master's fee. What a reasonable argument. Yes, there is that verse.
The old man quoted another scripture to prove that learning which has not been properly paid for is like water held in a vessel without a bottom. Srinivas reflected that here was Sampath enfolding yet another surprise. The old man lowered his voice and said, do you know, he has agreed to fix up the marriage of my granddaughter with your friend, though you forgot this old man's appeal?
I have not forgotten, replied Srinivas. But it seems Ravi is working under him and will listen to what he says.
I knew that that girl was fortunate and would not get any husband less than one getting 100 rupees a month. You will keep all this to yourself? Begged the old man, starting to go.
I came here expressly to give you this piece of good news. You are my only well-wisher. Who else is there to feel happy about the good things that happen to me?
You make me think less and less of those blighted sons and daughters of mine, those vultures. Ravi was very rarely to be seen nowadays. He sat making entries in ledgers in the office below.
Sampath had managed to put him into the account section, transferring his accountant to the art section of the studio. That's how I have been able to manage this affair with Somu, he confessed to Srinivas. But the other man, what can he do in the art department? Asked Srinivas in genuine doubt.
He will have to do something, otherwise he will lose his job. Do you know, under such a pressure, anybody will turn his hand to anything. That's how I find that most of our actors, musicians, and technicians are produced. You watch, in a short time that fellow will refuse to come back to accounts, because he will have bloomed into an artist, just when Ravi is prepared to do artwork.
And then I will be faced with a further complication with Somu. Do you know, I'm facing peculiar difficulties with Somu nowadays? At this moment Somu himself arrived in a big car.
As soon as he entered, he said, it's so difficult to approach this place, Sampath. We must very soon look out for a good building on the main road itself. How is the story progressing, sir? He asked, turning to Srinivas.
Srinivas tried to recapitulate to himself Sampath's account of Somu's partnership complications, and wondered in what way his present question was connected with that report. He found himself getting into a maze once again, and gave up the attempt. He merely replied, all the scenes will be ready very soon.
That's very good news.
We must fix up an auspicious day for cranking. I want to invite our district judge to switch on. Seeing that Srinivas received the suggestion without enthusiasm, he hastened to add, of course, you must allow us business people to do things in our own way.
What's the point in asking the judge to do it? Somu turned to Sampath, and said with a very significant wink, tell him some time. Sampath rose to the occasion and said, you will know soon.
All this has its own value. Srinivas turned to go upstairs, back to his work. He had been spending a considerable amount of time at the foot of the staircase with Sampath.
They had to do all the talking here because inside Sampath's office, in an antechamber, Ravi worked, and they had to talk of certain matters without his knowledge. Srinivas now felt that the time had come for him to beat a retreat, since the foot of the staircase was threatening to become a conference room. Somu stopped him and said, we must have another story conference shortly to see how far we have progressed.
You can go ahead with your other plans. I will tell you when it is all ready. One thing, mister, I want you to remember.
You must not fail to introduce a comic interlude. A slight frown came on Srinivas's face. I don't see how any comic interlude can be put into this.
Please try. It would make the picture very popular. People would come again and again to laugh.
Personally, do you know, I always like something that makes me laugh. The old landlord waited for Srinivas at the road bend, explaining, I could have come to your house and caught you, but didn't. You are sure to press on me your hospitality, and what will people say?
This old fellow goes there to snatch a free cup of coffee. No, sir, I don't want that reputation. I have always had honorable dealings with all my tenants.
Except in the matter of water taps. Oh, you always have a word about that. All right.
I will add a new tap, not one, several, one for each block. Are you satisfied? When?
When? Oh, you cross-examine me like a lawyer, sir. That's why people always say, beware of people who write.
You have not answered my question, Srinivas said. You are very difficult to satisfy, he replied, as if paying a compliment. If it were any other landlord, he would have become distracted. Well, I'm not here to talk about all that now.
I've an important matter on which to consult you. You are going to your office. Shall I walk along with you?
Oh, you will feel bored and tired, coming back all alone, said Srinivas, trying to put him off. That shows you don't know me, said the old man. There is no loneliness for a sannyasi like me.
If I keep repeating Om, I have the best companion on a lonely way. Don't you know this sloka? Wherever my mind, there be your form. Wherever my head, there be your feet. Srinivas slowed down his pace, and the old man followed him.
After several more questions, he said, What do you think of Sampath's film company? What are they doing? Srinivas explained as well as he could its various aspects and purposes.
Do you really think it is a very profitable concern? Srinivas could not easily answer the question. I'm sorry, I don't know much about that.
The old man stopped for a moment to hold him by the arm and say, how careful. You don't want to give away trade secrets, is that it? He gave the other a knowing wink.
Srinivas tried not to look portentous, and said, I will find out, if you like, from Sampath all about it. No, 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 the old man cried, alarmed. Not that way.
I don't want you to speak to Sampath about it. I don't want him to think I've been talking about it. He trusted me with a confidence.
No, no. I was just thinking that if I invested 5,000 at 12.5%. Why not 10,000?
Why not 50,000? Asked the old man. You seem to imagine I've a lot of cash. He looked horror-stricken at the thought of someone thinking him rich.
I've only a few coppers kept for the marriage of that child. If it can be multiplied without any trouble, it will mean a little more happiness for the child. Sampath is taking an interest in her, and so I thought. He meandered on, and then feeling that he had spoken too much of his finances, shut up suddenly.
Well, I will get back. I thought you might be able to give me some information. He turned abruptly round, leaving Srinivas to go forward alone.
Srinivas went to his office, trying to divine what exact technique Sampath was employing with the old man. An indication of it was not long in coming. Sampath followed him upstairs to his room.
Well, Mr. Editor, I think after all I can make up the capital. Srinivas did not feel it necessary to put any question, since he was listening to something he already knew. He hooked up his upper cloth and went to his chair.
Sampath looked at his wristwatch. Recently a watch had appeared on his wrist, and he constantly looked at it. I can manage to stay with you for a quarter of an hour more.
I've asked some people from the music department to come and meet me. Apparently he intended to become reflective for those 15 minutes. I'm really puzzled, nowadays, Mr. Editor.
I shall be obliged if you will enlighten me. What am I in the scheme of things? On one side I interview actors, artists and musicians. I run about for Somu, doing various errands for the studio, and I have the task of our picture, its direction and so on.
He swelled with importance. Now what am I? He looked so puzzled that Srinivas felt obliged to answer. Who can answer that question?
If you understood it, you would understand everything. He thought that perhaps Sampath's formal studies with the old man had wakened him to new problems. This idea was soon dispelled by Sampath.
Am I the producer of this picture or am I not? It was just to decide this question that I wanted capital. I think I can make up the amount. At any rate, your landlord is showing an interest in the proposition.
And also clearing a lot of your philosophical doubts, I suppose? Srinivas added. Sampath laughed heartily. Well, sir, believe me, I do wish to know something about self and the universe.
What greater privilege can one have than studying at the feet of a great master? He shut his eyes reverently and pressed his palms in a salute at the memory of his guru. And Srinivas asked, "And how are you going to fulfill your promise to see his granddaughter married?"
Oh, that? Well, that is really a problem. I hope, he lowered his voice, that our friend downstairs will help us. But you have already promised to find him his sweetheart, Srinivas reminded him.
Oh, yes, yes. He looked agonized at the number of the undertakings that weighed him down. An idea flashed into his mind and he looked relieved. Probably it was this granddaughter that he used to see at the temple.
Who knows? Let us have a look at that sketch, editor. Srinivas took out the sketch.
At the sight of it, with its ray of light reflected off the diamond on the earlobe, Srinivas was thrilled and cried out, "Oh, the boy ought to be drawing and painting and flooding the world with his pictures. This is a poorer world without them." He sighed.
Yes, sir, I agree. Even today, if he were prepared to get on to the art department, I would make a place for him there. He scrutinized the picture and shook his head despondently.
No, the landlord's granddaughter is different. Have you seen her? Oh, yes, daily.
I am coaching her in the arts. Smart girl. I wish Ravi would see sense.
But, he became reflective, I don't know what we can do if he has set his heart on this type, though a girl in the flesh ought to be worth a dozen on paper. Can't you put some sense into him? I think he will listen to you, and it will please the old man.
Srinivas said nothing in reply. Sampath remained gazing at the picture absent-mindedly, and suddenly cried, "This face looks familiar, wait a minute." He got up and ran downstairs and returned bearing an album under his arm.
He opened its leaves, placed it on the table and pointed at a snapshot of a girl pasted in it. Under it was written, APPLN. Number 345, Madras, name Shanti.
Srinivas looked at the face and then compared it with that in the sketch. Well, it looks very much like it. Have you got her address?
Of course, we can call her up. Her face struck me as the most feasible type for Parvati. Sampath scrutinized her face very carefully now.
I will send off a telegram. He cried. We must give her a mic and camera test at once, and if that is okay, I am sure she will do very well.
We can make a star of her. Srinivas felt happy. So this means Ravi's worst troubles are over.
He will be so glad. Let us tell him. Sampath was hesitant.
Oh, please wait. She may be someone else or she may have some other problems. I think we'd better wait. Well, there doesn't seem to be any harm.
All that he wants is to take a look at her. That'll ease his mind so much that we can get him to work. Sampath was very lukewarm about that proposition. He shut the album, put it under his arm and started to go.
He paused in the doorway to say, "No, Mr. Editor. Please do not tell him anything yet. It's studio business, it's better that such things should not get complicated."
You see, we have to move cautiously. As you know, Somu is a funny sort of man, and he may misconstrue the whole thing. He wandered on, Srinivas not comprehending much.
When Somu's name cropped up, there were always hints of vast complications, and Srinivas left it all alone. A story conference met on the day. Srinivas mentioned that his writing was completed.
Somu was beside himself with joy, and Sampath was stung into fresh activity. The mellow said, "Well, sir, the studio only starts its real work now." He rolled up his sleeves and lit a cigarette and gave an affectionate pat to his green cigarette tin.
They sat around Srinivas's table as he began the reading. Scene 1, Kailash, mountain peaks in the background, rolling peaks, with eyes gleaming in multicolor. The mellow interrupted to say, "Oh, don't bother about all that detail, it is the business of the art department. You can just indicate the location."
Go ahead, Mr. Srinivas, implored Somu, who looked docile and pleased. He seemed quite ready to do Srinivas's bidding at this moment. He was so awestruck by his ability to fill up 100-odd foolscap sheets with the story. But he was not prepared to confess his admiration in full.
He said, "Writing requires a lot of patience. You must sit down and fill up page after page, a thing which we businessmen cannot afford to do. That is why we have to depend upon intellectuals like you, sir." He spoke as if he were presenting a casket and reading out the address printed on silk.
Sampath cut him short with, "Shan't we go on with the story?" The mellow put down a cigarette stub and pressed his shoe on it. Tobacco smoke hung in the air.
Srinivas read on. Second scene, Parvati, a young woman of great beauty, with her maids. De Mello interrupted. How can we be sure till we fix up the actress?
Somu looked despondent. He looked pathetically at Sampath and asked, Yes. What do you say to that?
In Hollywood we never approach the story till we have fixed up the chief artists. This is not Hollywood, Srinivas said. So let us try to find the people who will do the part.
But that doesn't pay, Mr. Srinivas. In films, the real saleable commodity is the star value. All other things are secondary.
Sampath tried to smooth matters out with, we will make stars, if the ready-made ones are not available. Somehow this seemed to please the other members of the conference, and Somu and De Mello said almost simultaneously, that is a very good point, Sampath. We've got to make stars.
To Srinivas it seemed as if they were going to cling to this phrase now and forever. He shuddered to think that they might be going to repeat it like a litany. Star. Star.
We must make a star. But he realized that the matter was proceeding on correct conference lines. It was the essence of a conference that somebody should say something, and somebody else should say something else, and a third person should throw out a catchphrase for all to pick up and wear proudly like a buttonhole.
This was the approved method of a conference, and he could not object to it. And so, although he was being constantly interrupted, he curbed his own annoyance and continued his reading. He felt he was emulating a street preacher he had encountered in his younger days in his town, a man who came to propagate Christianity and lectured to a crowd, unmindful of the heckling, booing, and general discouragement.
Srinivas had even seen a grass seller throwing her burden at the preacher's head, but he went on explaining the Gospels. Such a faith in one's mission was needed at this moment. Srinivas persisted, scene after scene with the description, action and dialogue followed, and this continuous drone lulled them into silence.
As darkness gathered around his room and voices rose from the tenements below, he became lost in his own narration. His listeners seemed to him just shadows. Even De Mello's tobacco fog rose to the cobweb-covered ceiling and paused there. Srinivas read on, inspired by his own vision, though he could not decide whether they were lost in enjoyment of his reading or were asleep.
He read with difficulty in the gathering darkness, afraid to get up and switch on the light, lest that should break the spell and set them talking.